Hi everyone, welcome to Difference Frames the World, a channel to see the world differently. As we are facing financial difficulties, we can only publish 1 or 2 videos a week, but we will resume daily uploads later when our situation improves. Please subscribe to our channel and share our videos with your friends, so we can keep DFTW moving forward further and longer. Today we discuss the conflict between Russia and NATO, and why Russia wants to maintain a close relationship with China and other global South countries. In the video uploaded several days ago, we discussed where Russia is going after Putin's victory in his pursuit of the 5th presidency till 2030. We specifically talked about NATO's involvement in the Ukraine war. 2 years have passed since Russia started the special military operation, and today, it is no longer a war between two countries. Instead, it has already become an all-out war between NATO and Russia. As we said earlier, it is least likely that Ukraine will win the war, and the chance of recovering the newly annexed states and Crimea is meager. When the West realized Ukraine would lose the war, NATO member states sought a way to send troops to the Ukraine battlefield without triggering NATO's collective defense stated in Article 5 of the North Atlantic Treaty. A leaked report from Germany explained that certain NATO nations could send soldiers to Ukraine at their discretion, and it further argued that if those soldiers from NATO states were killed in Ukraine, NATO would not have to start a head-to-head war with Russia as Ukraine was not a member state of NATO yet. NATO is in a dilemma. It does not want Ukraine to lose the war, but it fears a direct war with Russia. Since the start of the Ukraine war in February 2022, many have asked Putin about the possibility of NATO involvement if Ukraine failed. With no exception, Putin responded that everything was possible and constantly warned NATO not to get involved. Putin threatened many times that NATO's sending troops to Ukraine would lead to a global disaster. Neither Russia nor Ukraine has won the war, although Russia has gained the upper hand. Russia has gained something, although not as planned. It annexed Donetsk and 3 other regions in the same way of taking over Crimea a decade ago. Ukraine is still fighting to win those regions back, and it never gives up Crimea. It is worth mentioning that few countries in the world recognize the recently annexed states and Crimea as Russia's lands. In previous videos, we said the negotiation between Russia and Ukraine was unlikely, and we still maintain that it is challenging for both sides to sit down for peace talks. The Ukrainian president had stated many times that there would not be talks before Russia withdrew its troops from Ukraine's land. Still, Ukraine has softened recently, and the Ukrainian leader has reportedly agreed to start talks before Russian troops leave Ukraine within 1991 borders. We have always said that the war between Ukraine and Russia is a proxy war between NATO and Moscow, and without NATO's unprecedented support, Kyiv would have lost the war. The United States is at the core of NATO, and it has been pushing NATO eastward in the past 3 decades since the Cold War ended unexpectedly in the early 1990s. After the collapse of the former Soviet Union, the US became the world's only superpower. Since then, it has tried maintaining the so-called rules-based international order with its dollar hegemony, high-tech capabilities, and military strength. However, Russia's nuclear arsenal and China's economic strength constantly drive American politicians mad. The power shift from the west to the east is unstoppable, and Asia is becoming the world's new center. It is one of the main reasons why Putin pivoted to the east even before the Ukraine war started. Russia used to regard itself as a traditional European country, and Europe was Russia's focal point. Putin even wanted to join NATO, believing George Bush Jr. was his best friend. Russia is the last country NATO wants to admit, as Russia is NATO's target. After the former USSR dissolved, Russia became NATO's target to hold its member states together. Although NATO did not admit Russia as a member, it restlessly admitted Russia's neighbors as new member states. The recent admission of Sweden and Finland into NATO was NATO's latest eastward advancement, threatening Russia's national safety. The Baltic Sea has become NATO's lake, and Norway, Finland and Sweden have all become NATO members. Russia only has 2 friends in Europe, Serbia and Belarus. Russia's inherent greed for land makes most European countries afraid that Russia will not stop after it defeats Ukraine. As a result, Russia is forced to shift its focus to the global South countries, among which China is the most important. After Beijing successfully held the 2008 Olympic Games, the world suddenly found China had become the locomotive of global economic development. America's consumption and China's production have since constituted two motors of the world economy. In recent years, China has tried to build a modern army. It has 3 aircraft carriers already, and the 4th and 5th are also on the way. After the Korean War in the early 1950s, the country's infantry was considered the best in the world. Now, its navy also ranks first regarding the number of surface ships. Although China is not an aggressive country, the West regards it as a dragon, an icon constantly reminding Western politicians of the yellow peril. As a result, former U.S. President Obama started implementing his Pivot to Asia strategy, and the U.S. even renamed that area Indo-Pacific. Obama visited India twice, hoping to unite with India against China. His vice president, Joe Biden, inherited and extended the Pivot to Asia strategy after he stepped into the White House in early 2021. Unlike his predecessors, Joe Biden started to confront Russia and China simultaneously, hoping to weaken Russia's military threat and curb China's economic growth. He called Russian President Putin a killer and Chinese President Xi Jinping a dictator, when convincing his voters he is still mentally healthy and physically stable. Joe Biden is a typical American politician. He is not hesitant to mess up other countries' domestic affairs, undermine their core interests, and initiate wars to divide and control the world. The Ukraine conflict is not a fight between Russia and Ukraine as it appears, but it is a game between NATO and Russia. Even though the US and other NATO member states do not officially send soldiers to the battlefield in Ukraine, they send military instructors to help fortify Ukraine's self-defense. Western nations also started an economic war with Russia. They sanctioned Moscow thousands of times, covering energy, science and technology, economic and trade, transportation, and even education. Even Russian dog and cat owners cannot bring their pets to international contests in certain countries. However, Russia is the world's biggest country and a global energy supplier, and it plays a significant role in Europe's energy market. Europe's industry can only remain competitive with Russia's oil and natural gas. When the West began sanctioning Russia, Europe became the victim instead. Germany is a good example. In 2023, Germany saw an economic contraction of 0.5%, much worse than in 2021 and 2022, when it recorded growth of 3.2% and 1.8% respectively. We pointed out in previous videos that the US wanted to use the Ukraine conflict to weaken Russia's military and destroy Europe's economy. Although the US still regards itself as the world's only superpower, its influence is diminishing along with its declining military power and dollar hegemony. Moscow has the world's most extensive nuclear arsenal with over 6,000 warheads, America's #1 threat. Europe, particularly the European Union, threatens the US dollar hegemony with its euro, and European companies compete fiercely with American firms. As a result, the US hates to see an assertive Russia and a prosperous China, and it prefers a divided Europe. Unlike his predecessors, who tried to avoid fighting with Russia and China simultaneously, Joe Biden confronts Moscow and Beijing concurrently, believing the US can defeat them in Europe and Asia like a breeze. The Ukraine war, however, has not weakened Russia as expected, and America's provocations in Taiwan and the South China Sea have not harmed China much either. However, NATO plans to escalate the conflict further after accepting Sweden and Finland as its member states in 2023 and 2024, respectively. On March 21, 2024, the chair of the NATO Military Committee visited Kiev for the first time, after the Ukraine war started in February 2022. He stated that NATO and Ukraine are growing closer every day and becoming ever more interoperable. On April 3, 2024, NATO Secretary-General Jens Stoltenberg stated at a press conference in Brussels that all allies agree that Ukraine will become a member, and that we must continue moving Ukraine closer to NATO membership. Despite Putin's repeated warnings, NATO involves itself deeper and deeper in the Ukraine conflict. On January 22, 2024, over 90,000 soldiers, sailors, and airmen from 31 NATO member states and Sweden joined the largest exercise in decades, trying to influence the Russian election and support Ukraine. The drill, Steadfast Defender 2024, will last nearly 5 months and end in mid-June. In response, Russia is strengthening its ties with China and North Korea. On April 2, 2024, Japan and South Korea detected a middle-range ballistic missile launch, which North Korea's state media confirmed 1 day later. The report says it is an intermediate-range hypersonic missile with solid fuel. We can smell the danger of World War III now, and today's situation is even more dangerous than the Cuban Missile Crisis in the early 1960s. Will NATO start a war with Russia and trigger the World War III? We will answer the question in the following video. Please subscribe to our channel and forward our videos to your friends so more people know about our efforts to make a difference.